Summary and analysis of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. What if the biggest mistake of your life wasn't something you did, but something you believed about another person? What if your pride stopped you from being seeing the truth? Or your prejudice convinced you that someone was far worse than they really were? That is the question at the heart of Pride and Prejudice. At first, Elizabeth Bennet sees Darcy as arrogant, cold, and impossible to like. Darcy, meanwhile, looks down on Elizabeth's family because of their social standing. Both are intelligent, both are confident in their judgment, and both are wrong. What follows is much more than a love story. It is a story about first impressions, wounded egos, social class, family pressures, and the painful discovery that we don't always understand people as well as we think we do. More than 200 years after it was written, this novel still feels surprisingly modern because the struggle between pride and prejudice is something all of us face even today. Let's see why. Summary of Pride and Prejudice. The story begins in the English countryside where the Bennet family lives. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet have five daughters: Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. Since there is no son in the family, there is a serious problem hanging over their future. Under the law of that time, the family property cannot pass to the daughters. After Mr. Bennet's death, the estate will go to a male relative. This means the daughters must find good husbands if they want financial security. Mrs. Bennet thinks about little else. She is always worried about marriage prospects for her daughters. Mr. Bennet, on the other hand, is calm, intelligent, and often amused by his wife's endless concern. One day, exciting news spreads through the neighborhood. A wealthy young gentleman named Mr. Bingley has rented a large estate called Netherfield Park. He is rich, unmarried, and friendly. To many families, he looks like the perfect husband. Mrs. Bennet is thrilled. Soon a grand ball is held and the entire neighborhood gathers to meet the newcomer. Mr. Bingley immediately makes a good impression. He is cheerful, polite, and easy to like. During the evening, he dances several times with Jane Bennet, the eldest Bennet daughter. Everyone notices his interest in her. Jane is beautiful, gentle, and kind hearted. She always tries to see the good in people. Mr. Bingley seems equally pleased with her. But another man at the ball attracts even more attention. Mr. Darcy arrives with Mr. Bingley. He is far wealthier than his friend. People quickly learn that he owns a large estate and has a great fortune. At first, the guests admire him. Then he begins to speak. Darcy appears distant and proud. He does not mix easily with the crowd. Worse still, Elizabeth overhears him refusing to dance with her. He says she is not handsome enough to tempt him. The comment hurts. Elizabeth laughs it off in public, but she does not forget it. From that moment, she forms a strong dislike for Darcy. This small incident becomes one of the most important moments in the novel. Many of us have done something similar. We hear one comment, witness one awkward moment, and decide that we fully understand another person's character. We stop looking for new evidence because we believe our first judgment is correct. Elizabeth is intelligent, but she is not free from this weakness. As the weeks pass, Jane and Bingley grow closer. Their affection seems natural and sincere. Elizabeth is happy for her sister. When Jane falls ill after visiting Netherfield, she is forced to stay there for several days. Elizabeth walks a long distance through muddy fields to visit her. This surprises many people, including Darcy. Until now, he has mainly noticed Elizabeth's lower social position and sometimes embarrassing family members. But during her stay at Netherfield, he begins to pay closer attention to her intelligence, honesty, and lively personality. Something unexpected starts to happen. The man Elizabeth dislikes is slowly becoming interested in her. Darcy admires her quick mind. He enjoys their conversations. He finds himself thinking about her more and more. Elizabeth, however, sees none of this. Her opinion of him remains unchanged. In fact, it becomes even worse when a charming young officer named George Wickham enters the story. Wickham is handsome, friendly, and pleasant to talk to. Unlike Darcy, he immediately knows how to win people over. Before long, he shares a shocking story with Elizabeth. According to Wickham, Darcy treated him unfairly and robbed him of opportunities that had been promised to him. Elizabeth readily believes every word. Why? Because the story fits the picture she has already created in her mind. She already thinks Darcy is arrogant and selfish. Wickham's tale seems to confirm her judgment. This is where the novel begins to show its deeper message. People often accept information not because it is true, but because it supports what they already believe. Elizabeth does not ask many questions. She does not look for proof. She simply accepts Wickham's version of events. At the same time, another problem is developing. Darcy's friend, Mr. Bingley, is falling deeply in love with Jane. Yet some people around him begin to worry about the match. They believe Jane's family lacks refinement and social standing. Darcy is among those who have concerns. Although he respects Jane, he is not convinced that her feelings for Bingley are as strong as Bingley's feelings for her. Without realizing it, Darcy is about to make a decision that will affect several lives. The stage is now set for misunderstandings, wounded feelings, and mistakes that will push every major character toward a difficult lesson. The pride is growing, the prejudice is growing. Neither side yet understands how wrong they may be. Not long after these events, something painful happens. Mr. Bingley suddenly leaves Netherfield and returns to London. Even worse, he does not come back. Jane is heartbroken. She never openly complains because that is her nature. Jane is the kind of person who suffers quietly. She continues her daily life, but Elizabeth can see the disappointment hidden beneath her calm appearance. Mrs. Bennet is furious. She had almost begun to imagine a wedding. Elizabeth soon learns that Mr. Bingley's sisters do not approve of Jane. They believe their brother should marry someone from a wealthier and more influential family. Darcy also played a role in separating the couple. He convinced Bingley that Jane's feelings were not as deep as they appeared. To Elizabeth, this confirms everything she already thinks about Darcy. In her eyes, he is proud, controlling, and willing to interfere in the happiness of others. Time passes, and Elizabeth travels with relatives to visit Charlotte Lucas, one of her closest friends. Charlotte's situation deserves attention because it reveals another important side of the novel. Earlier, a pompous and foolish clergyman named Mr. Collins had proposed marriage to Elizabeth. She rejected him immediately. She could never imagine spending her life with a man she neither respected nor loved. Here we need to recall that Mr. Collins is that distant male relative to whom the Bennet property will go once Mr. Bennet dies. Therefore, Mr. Collins thinks that marrying one of the daughters of Mr. Bennet, especially Elizabeth, is the most natural and logical thing to do. Soon afterward, however, Mr. Collins proposed to Charlotte, and Charlotte accepted. At first, Elizabeth is shocked. Why would her intelligent friend marry such a ridiculous man? But Charlotte sees life differently. She is older, has limited financial prospects, and knows that opportunities for women are few. She is not looking for romance, she is looking for stability. Jane Austen quietly asks a difficult question here. Should marriage be based on love, or should it be based on practical needs? Different characters in the novel answer that question in different ways. While visiting Charlotte, Elizabeth often meets Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a wealthy and highly influential noblewoman. Lady Catherine enjoys giving advice whether people want it or not. She expects everyone around her to admire her position and obey her opinions. Elizabeth, however, is not easily intimidated. She remains polite, but she refuses to surrender her independence. This quality makes her one of Austen's most memorable characters. Elizabeth respects intelligence and character, not social rank. Then comes one of the most surprising moments in the story. Mr. Darcy visits unexpectedly. Over time, his feelings for Elizabeth have grown stronger. He has tried to resist them, but he can no longer do so. Finally, he proposes marriage. For many women in that society, Darcy would have been considered the perfect husband. He is wealthy, respected, and connected to powerful families. But the proposal goes terribly wrong. Darcy speaks honestly, yet his honesty reveals a problem. While declaring his love, he also talks about Elizabeth's lower social position and the disadvantages of her family. In other words, he tells her that he loves her despite all the reasons he believes he should not. Elizabeth is deeply offended. Years of frustration pour out at once. She accuses him of arrogance. She accuses him of separating Bingley and Jane. She accuses him of ruining Wickham's future. Then she rejects him. Darcy leaves in anger and disappointment. For the first time in the novel, both characters are forced to confront themselves. Darcy realizes that his pride has damaged him. He has spent so much time thinking about status and social class that he failed to understand how his behavior appeared to others. But Elizabeth's lesson is about to be even more painful. The next day, Darcy gives her a letter. Inside, he responds to every accusation. He admits that he separated Bingley and Jane. He believed Jane was not truly in love and that the marriage might bring future unhappiness. Whether he was right or wrong, he acted because he thought he was protecting his friend. Then he addresses the matter of Wickham. What Elizabeth reads shocks her. According to Darcy, Wickham is not an innocent victim at all. He had already received financial help and opportunities from Darcy's family. Instead of using them wisely, he wasted them. He later attempted to run away with Darcy's young sister, not out of love, but for her fortune. At first, Elizabeth can hardly believe it. She rereads the letter again and again. Slowly, the truth begins to sink in. She remembers moments that did not fit Wickham's story. She remembers details she ignored because she wanted to believe him. For perhaps the first time in her life, Elizabeth realizes that she has been badly mistaken. This is the turning point of the novel. Until now, Elizabeth believed she was an excellent judge of character. She trusted her intelligence completely. Now she sees her own weakness. She judged Darcy too quickly. She trusted appearances. She accepted a pleasant story because it matched her existing opinion. The realization is painful, but it is also the beginning of growth. Jane Austen is showing us something that remains true today. Being intelligent does not protect us from making mistakes. Sometimes, intelligent people make even bigger mistakes because they become too confident in their own judgment. As Elizabeth reflects on everything that has happened, her certainty begins to disappear. Questions replace conclusions, doubt replaces confidence. For the first time, she starts to see Darcy not as the villain of the story, but as a complicated human being. And once that door opens, nothing can remain the same. After reading Darcy's letter, Elizabeth cannot stop thinking. The more she reflects on the past, the more uncomfortable she feels. She remembers how easily she trusted Wickham. She remembers how quickly she judged Darcy. Most of all, she realizes that she never seriously questioned her own opinion. That is not an easy lesson. Many people can forgive others for being wrong. It is much harder to admit that we ourselves have been wrong. Sometime later, Elizabeth travels with her aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner. During their journey, they decide to visit Pemberley, Darcy's magnificent estate. Elizabeth agrees only because she believes Darcy is away from home. The moment she arrives, she is surprised. The estate is beautiful, but what affects her most is not the house itself. It is what she hears about his owner. The housekeeper speaks warmly about Darcy. She describes him as kind, generous, and responsible. According to her, he treats his servants well and helps those who depend on him. Elizabeth is puzzled. This does not sound like the proud and heartless man she once imagined. Then something even more unexpected happens. Darcy suddenly arrives. Elizabeth is embarrassed. She had not expected to meet him there. Darcy could easily have made the situation uncomfortable. Instead, he behaves with remarkable courtesy. He is welcoming to Elizabeth, respectful to her relatives, and completely free of the arrogance she once associated with him. Elizabeth notices the change immediately. But the truth is that Darcy has not become a different person overnight. Rather, he has begun correcting his flaws. After Elizabeth rejected him, he took her criticisms seriously. Instead of becoming bitter, he tried to become better. That is one of the novel's most powerful ideas. Real growth begins when a person is willing to face uncomfortable truths about himself. As the days pass, Elizabeth spends more time with Darcy. She also meets his sister, Georgiana. Before this, Elizabeth had imagined Darcy's family as cold and proud. Yet, Georgiana is shy, gentle, and sincere. The picture Elizabeth had created in her mind continues to fall apart. Little by little, her feelings begin to change. Respect replaces suspicion, admiration replaces dislike. She starts to see the man behind her first impression. For the first time, she understands why others value him so highly. Just when happiness seems possible, disaster strikes. A letter arrives from home. Elizabeth's youngest sister, Lydia, has run away with Wickham. The news is devastating. In that society, such an event could destroy the reputation of the entire family. If Lydia and Wickham do not marry, every Bennet sister may suffer the consequences. Future marriage prospects could disappear. The family's name could be permanently damaged. Elizabeth is horrified. She immediately returns home. What makes the situation even more painful is that she now understands Wickham's true character. She knows how reckless and irresponsible he can be. At this point, Elizabeth assumes that any hope of a future with Darcy is over. Even if he still cares for her, she believes her family's disgrace will make marriage impossible. What she does not know is that Darcy is quietly taking action. Without seeking praise or recognition, he searches for Wickham. After finding him, Darcy negotiates a settlement, pays debts, and helps arrange a marriage between Wickham and Lydia. He does all this in secret. He does not tell Elizabeth, he does not ask for gratitude. He simply helps because he loves her. Eventually, the truth comes out and Elizabeth is stunned. The man she once considered selfish has acted with extraordinary generosity. The contrast could not be greater. Wickham, who seemed charming and trustworthy, turns out to be selfish. Darcy, who seemed cold and arrogant, turns out to be loyal and honorable. Jane Austen is reminding us once again that appearances can be misleading. Some people impress us quickly and disappoint us later. Others take time to understand. The novel rewards patience and careful judgment. Meanwhile, another important change is taking place. Mr. Bingley returns to the neighborhood. This time, he does not stay away. His affection for Jane has never disappeared. Free from earlier misunderstandings, he renews the relationship. Soon he proposes marriage. Jane happily accepts. At last, one of the novel's sweetest relationships reaches its reward. Unlike Elizabeth and Darcy, Jane and Bingley have never struggled with Pride and Prejudice. Their path has been blocked mostly by outside interference. Now that obstacle has been removed. Yet Elizabeth's own future remains uncertain. Her feelings toward Darcy have changed completely. The problem is that she does not know whether his feelings have survived everything that has happened. She once rejected him. Her family has suffered public embarrassment. Many barriers still stand between them. But the story is moving toward its final and most important test. The question is no longer whether Darcy loves Elizabeth. The question is whether two people who have learned painful lessons about themselves can finally find the courage to begin again. As the story moves towards its ending, the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy remains uncertain. Both have changed greatly since their first meeting. Darcy is no longer the man who believed social rank should guide every decision. Elizabeth is no longer the woman who trusted her first impressions without question. Yet neither of them knows exactly where they stand. Then a new obstacle appears. One morning, Lady Catherine Deepborg arrives unexpectedly at the Bennet home. She has heard rumors that Darcy may marry Elizabeth. To her, the idea is unacceptable. Lady Catherine has long imagined that Darcy would marry her own daughter. She believes such a match is appropriate because both families belong to the highest social circles. Elizabeth, in her opinion, is completely unsuitable. Lady Catherine demands an answer. She wants Elizabeth to promise that she will never accept a proposal from Darcy. But Elizabeth refuses, politely yet firmly. The scene is important because it shows how much Elizabeth has matured. Earlier in the novel, she often reacted quickly and emotionally. Now she speaks with confidence and self-respect. She does not know whether Darcy will ever propose again. She does not even know whether he still loves her. But she refuses to let another person decide her future. Lady Catherine leaves angry and frustrated. Ironically, her visit has the opposite effect of what she intended. When Darcy hears about Elizabeth's response, he gains hope. He realizes that her feelings may have changed. Soon afterward, he and Elizabeth meet again. This conversation is one of the most satisfying moments in the novel because it is built on honesty rather than misunderstanding. Darcy speaks openly. Elizabeth does the same. This time there is no pride standing between them. There is no prejudice either. Darcy tells Elizabeth that he still loves her. His feelings have not changed. Elizabeth, with equal honesty, admits that her feelings have changed completely. She thanks him for everything he did to help Lydia and the Bennet family. More importantly, she acknowledges how wrong she was about him. At last, the barriers fall away. Darcy proposes a second time. This time, Elizabeth accepts. The proposal succeeds because both characters have become better versions of themselves. That is the real love story of Pride and Prejudice. The novel is not simply about finding the right person, it is about becoming the right person. Many stories end with a wedding and suggest that marriage solves every problem. Jane Austen's novel is more thoughtful than that. Before Elizabeth and Darcy can be together, each must confront a serious flaw. Darcy must learn humility, Elizabeth must learn caution in judgment. Only after those lessons are learned can their relationship succeed. The remaining pieces of the story fall into place. Jane and Bingley marry and begin a happy life together. Elizabeth and Darcy marry well. Georgiana warmly welcomes Elizabeth into the family. Even Mr. Bennet, who rarely shows strong emotion, is delighted by the match. Mrs. Bennet is overjoyed. At last, her worries about her daughter's futures have largely disappeared. Not every character receives a perfect ending. Lydia and Wickham remain largely unchanged. Their marriage continues, but it lacks the stability and mutual respect seen in the other relationships. This is another lesson from Austen. Charm alone is not enough. Excitement alone is not enough. A strong relationship needs character, responsibility, and trust. When we step back and look at the novel as a whole, it becomes clear why readers have loved it for more than 2 centuries. On the surface, it is a story about families, courtship, and marriage in 19th century England. Beneath the surface, however, it speaks about human nature. Most of us have experienced pride at some point in our lives. Most of us have judged someone too quickly. Most of us have discovered that people are more complicated than they first appear. That is why the novel still feels fresh today. The houses, clothes, and customs belong to another century, but the emotions do not. The fear of rejection, the pain of being misunderstood, the temptation to judge too quickly, and the struggle to admit our mistakes are as real now as they were in Jane Austen's time. In the end, the title of the novel tells us everything we need to know. Pride blinds Darcy, prejudice blinds Elizabeth. Both must learn to see clearly. Only then they can recognize the truth about each other. And perhaps, more importantly, the truth about themselves. End of summary. Now the analysis. Is Pride and Prejudice a romance novel, a family drama, or a social commentary? The interesting answer is that Pride and Prejudice is all three. But if I had to choose just one, I would call it a social commentary disguised as a romance novel. Most first-time readers remember the love story between Elizabeth and Darcy. The romance is the engine that moves the plot forward. Their misunderstandings, arguments, growth, and eventual marriage give the novel its emotional pull. But if Austen only wanted to write a romance, she would not have spent so much time examining families, money, inheritance, social status, and marriage. The Bennet family itself is a study of family life. Mrs. Bennet is anxious and impulsive. Mr. Bennet is intelligent but often passive. Lydia is reckless. Jane is kind. Elizabeth is perceptive but sometimes mistaken. Through this family, Austen shows how parents and siblings shape each other's lives. Yet, even the family drama serves a larger purpose. Austen is really commenting on the society around her. Consider the questions running through the novel. Why must women depend so heavily on marriage for financial security? Why do people judge others based on wealth and social rank? Can a poor but intelligent woman be considered equal to a rich man? Why are some marriages based on love while others are based on convenience? How much damage can Pride and Prejudice cause? Every marriage in the novel becomes a social experiment. Jane and Bingley represent affection and mutual respect. Elizabeth and Darcy represent personal growth and understanding. Charlotte and Mr. Collins represent practical marriage without love. Lydia and Wickham represent attraction without responsibility. Austen compares these relationships and quietly asks the reader which kind of marriage leads to happiness. That is why I would rank the novel this way: social commentary, its deepest layer; romance, its main plot; family drama, its everyday setting. The genius of the novel is that Austen never sounds like she is preaching. She does not give long lectures about society. Instead, she lets ordinary conversations, family conflicts, and romantic misunderstandings reveal how her world works. So when people say Pride and Prejudice is one of the greatest romance novels ever written, they are right. But when literature professors spend entire courses discussing class, gender, power, marriage, and social expectations in the novel, they are right too. The romance attracts readers. The social commentary is what gives the novel its lasting value. Narrative arcs of Elizabeth and Darcy. Elizabeth and Darcy have some of the finest character arcs in literature because neither of them needs to be rescued by the other. Instead, both must confront their own flaws and grow as individuals. In a way, Pride and Prejudice is not the story of two people falling in love. It is the story of two people learning to see clearly. Elizabeth's arc, from confidence to self awareness. At the beginning of the novel, Elizabeth Bennet is intelligent, witty, independent, and quick minded. Readers naturally like her because she often sees through the foolishness of people around her. The problem is that Elizabeth trusts her judgment too much. When Darcy insults her at the first ball, she forms an opinion of him almost immediately. Later, when Wickham tells his story, she accepts it with very little skepticism because it confirms what she already believes. This is the prejudice of the title. Elizabeth is not prejudiced because of class or social status. Her prejudice is her tendency to make quick judgments and then defend them. One of the most important moments in the novel comes after she reads Darcy's letter. She begins to examine her own behavior honestly. For perhaps the first time, she realizes, I was wrong. That realization changes everything. From that point onward, Elizabeth becomes more thoughtful, more careful, and more willing to question her assumptions. By the end of the novel, she has lost none of her intelligence or independence, but she has gained humility and self awareness. Her arc is the journey from certainty to wisdom. Darcy's arc, from pride to humility. Darcy's problem is almost the opposite. He is intelligent, honorable, responsible, and genuinely decent. Yet he is also proud. He has grown up wealthy, respected, and socially privileged. As a result, he often assumes that his judgment is superior to that of others. He is not deliberately cruel, but he can appear cold, dismissive, and arrogant. This is the pride of the title. His first proposal to Elizabeth reveals his flaw perfectly. He tells her he loves her while simultaneously discussing the disadvantages of her family and social position. He genuinely loves her, but his pride prevents him from understanding how insulting his words sound. Elizabeth's rejection becomes a turning point. Instead of dismissing her criticism, Darcy listens to it. That is what makes him remarkable. Many proud people become defensive when confronted with their faults. Darcy does the opposite. He reflects on his behavior and begins changing it. When Elizabeth later meets him at Pemberley, she encounters a different man. He is more considerate, more approachable, and more respectful toward others. His actions regarding Lydia and Wickham show this growth even more clearly. He helps the Bennet family without seeking credit or praise. By the end of the novel, Darcy remains confident and strong, but he has learned humility. His arc is the journey from status conscious pride to genuine generosity. Why their arcs work so well? Many love stories follow a simple pattern. Two people meet, obstacles appear, and eventually they get together. Austen does something more interesting. The biggest obstacle is not society, distance, or a villain. The biggest obstacle is the characters themselves. Elizabeth cannot love Darcy because she misunderstands him. Darcy cannot win Elizabeth because he has not yet confronted his own arrogance. Before they can unite, each must grow. This is why their relationship feels earned rather than automatic. The deeper meaning. Austen's real message is that character matters more than first impressions. Elizabeth learns that intelligence alone does not guarantee good judgment. Darcy learns that wealth and status do not make a person superior. By the end of the novel, both become better people than they were at the beginning. That is why the final marriage feels satisfying. It is not simply a romantic reward, it is the result of two difficult personal journeys. Darcy overcomes pride, Elizabeth overcomes prejudice. Only then can they truly understand each other. Main characters in Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Bennet. Elizabeth is the heart of the novel. She is intelligent, witty, independent, and unwilling to accept ideas simply because society expects her to. Unlike many young women of her time, she wants a marriage based on respect and affection rather than money or social advantage. Her sharp observations often allow her to see through the foolishness of people around her, which makes her one of the most appealing characters in English literature. At the same time, Elizabeth has an important weakness. She trusts her own judgment too much. After Darcy insults her at the first ball, she forms a negative opinion of him and becomes eager to believe anything that confirms that opinion. Her journey is about learning humility and self awareness. Through Elizabeth, Austen shows that intelligence alone is not enough. We must also be willing to question our own assumptions. Since the story is largely seen through her eyes, her growth becomes the central moment of the novel. Fitzwilliam Darcy. Darcy is proud, reserved, and socially awkward. Because he is wealthy and comes from a respected family, He has spent much of his life among people who treat him differently from everyone else. As a result, he often appears arrogant even when he does not intend to. He judges people by standards of education, manners, and social position, which causes many misunderstandings. Yet beneath that proud exterior lies a deeply honorable man. Darcy is loyal to his friends, devoted to his family, and willing to help others without seeking recognition. Elizabeth's rejection forces him to examine himself honestly. Instead of becoming defensive, he changes. His arc is one of the greatest examples of personal growth in literature. Through Darcy, Austen explores how pride can isolate a person and how humility can transform relationships. Jane Bennet. Jane is the eldest Bennet sister and represents kindness in its purest form. She always tries to see the good in others and avoids speaking badly about anyone. Her beauty attracts attention, but her gentle nature is what truly defines her character. Unlike Elizabeth, who quickly forms opinions, Jane prefers to withhold judgment until she has enough evidence. Her greatest strength is also her weakness. Because she assumes the best about people, she sometimes overlooks their faults. Jane's relationship with Bingley provides a contrast to the more complicated relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy. Through Jane, Austen shows the value of kindness and patience while also suggesting that excessive optimism can leave a person vulnerable. Charles Bingley. Bingley is cheerful, friendly, and easygoing. Almost everyone likes him because he treats people warmly and without arrogance. Unlike Darcy, he does not place much importance on social status. His open and trusting personality makes him one of the most pleasant characters in the novel. However, Bingley is easily influenced by others. He allows Darcy and his sisters to persuade him to leave Jane despite his feelings for her. This shows a lack of confidence in his own judgment. His role in the story is important because he demonstrates that a good heart alone is not always enough. A person must also have the courage to make independent decisions. George Wickham. Wickham is charming, handsome, and skilled at making a good first impression. He knows exactly what people want to hear and uses that ability to gain sympathy and admiration. When he tells Elizabeth his story about Darcy, he appears honest and trustworthy. As the novel progresses, however, his true nature emerges. Wickham is selfish, irresponsible, and motivated largely by personal gain. He prefers easy solutions to honest effort. Austen uses Wickham to show how dangerous appearances can be. He is the perfect example of someone who seems admirable on the surface but lacks real character underneath. His actions help drive Elizabeth's misunderstanding of Darcy and therefore play a major role in the plot. Lydia Bennett. Lydia is the youngest Bennet sister and perhaps the most immature. She is energetic, impulsive, and constantly seeking excitement. She rarely thinks about consequences and often acts on whatever feeling is strongest at the moment. Her behavior reflects a failure of her upbringing. Unlike Elizabeth and Jane, Lydia has received little guidance or discipline. Her decision to run away with Wickham creates the greatest crisis in the novel. Through Lydia, Austen illustrates how carelessness and lack of self control can affect not only an individual but an entire family. Mr. Bennet. Mr. Bennet is intelligent, sarcastic, and often amusing. He understands the weaknesses of many people around him, especially his wife and younger daughters. His sharp wit makes him one of the most entertaining characters in the novel. Yet, Austen does not present him as an ideal father. Although he sees problems clearly, he often refuses to act. Rather than correcting Lydia's behavior, he chooses to laugh at it. His passivity contributes to many of the family's difficulties. Through Mr. Bennet, Austen suggests that wisdom without responsibility is incomplete. Seeing a problem is not the same as solving it. Mrs. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet is anxious, emotional, and obsessed with finding husbands for her daughters. At first glance, she appears foolish and often provides comic relief. Her constant excitement, complaints, and social ambitions frequently embarrass Elizabeth. Yet Austen treats her more sympathetically than many readers realize. Mr. Bennet understands something that others sometimes forget. Her daughters' futures are uncertain. Because of inheritance laws, they may one day face financial insecurity. Her fears are often exaggerated, but they are not entirely unreasonable. Through Mrs. Bennet, Austen highlights the limited opportunities available to women in her society and the pressures families faced when arranging marriages. Important questions about Pride and Prejudice. Question 1. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. How does this famous opening line establish the novel's ironic tone, social commentary, and the reader's role? What does it imply about women, marriage, and Regency society? This famous opening line immediately establishes the novel's ironic tone. Austen says that every rich unmarried man must be looking for a wife, but she actually means the opposite. In reality, it is the families with unmarried daughters who are eager to find wealthy husbands. By presenting this idea as a universal truth, Austen gently mocks the values of her society and prepares readers to look beyond appearances throughout the novel. The line also introduces one of the book's central concerns, the relationship between marriage, money, and social status. To a modern reader, the excitement surrounding a wealthy bachelor may seem exaggerated, but in Austen's world, marriage often had serious financial consequences. Families paid close attention to wealth, property, and social position because these factors could shape a person's entire future. To fully understand this, it helps to know a little about Regency England, the period in which Austen lived and wrote. Society was strongly divided by class and family status. In many cases, property was passed down through the male line. This is exactly the problem facing the Bennet family. Because Mr. Bennet has no son, his estate is legally tied to a male heir and cannot pass through to his daughters. After his death, the property will go to Mr. Collins, a distant male relative. This means that the Bennet sisters may one day lose the home in which they grew up. Suddenly, Mrs. Bennet's obsession with marriage begins to make more sense. She is often foolish and comic, but her fear is real. If her daughters do not marry well, they could face an uncertain future. Austen uses this social reality to show that marriage in her society was not only about love, it was also connected to financial security, family survival, and social standing. From the very first sentence, Austen invites readers to think critically about these pressures rather than simply accept them. Question 2. Jane Austen originally considered titling the novel First Impressions. Why is Pride and Prejudice generally considered the stronger or more effective title? In what specific ways do Elizabeth, Darcy, and other characters embody both pride and prejudice? First Impressions would have been an appropriate title because much of the story grows out of mistaken judgment. Elizabeth misjudges Darcy, Darcy misjudges Elizabeth's family, and many characters form opinions based on appearances rather than reality. The novel repeatedly shows how dangerous first impressions can be. However, Pride and Prejudice is a stronger title because it goes deeper. It does not simply describe the mistake the characters make, it identifies the flaws that cause those mistakes. Darcy's pride comes from his wealth, social position, and confidence in his own judgment. Elizabeth's prejudice comes from her quick acceptance of negative opinions about Darcy, especially after he insults her at the first ball. Their first impressions are only symptoms. Pride and prejudice are the real causes. Darcy is the clearest example of pride. He believes that social rank matters greatly and initially looks down on people he considers beneath him. This attitude leads him to interfere in Bingley and Jane's relationship and makes his first proposal to Elizabeth sound insulting rather than romantic. Over the course of the novel, he learns humility and becomes more aware of how his behavior affects others. Elizabeth is the clearest example of prejudice. She is intelligent, but she becomes so confident in her judgment that she accepts Wickham's story without demanding evidence. Because she already dislikes Darcy, she is eager to believe the worst about him. Only after reading Darcy's letter does she realize how much her own bias has influenced her thinking. Other characters also display these qualities. Lady Catherine's pride comes from her noble status and her belief that social rank makes her superior to others. Wickham shows a different kind of pride through his sense of entitlement and refusal to take responsibility for his actions. Even Elizabeth and Darcy, by the end of the novel, recognize that both pride and prejudice exist within themselves. That realization allows them to grow. The title therefore captures not just a single misunderstanding, but the central moral journey of the entire novel. Question 3. Trace the development of Elizabeth's feelings for Darcy. What role does her visit to Pemberley play? How realistic is the evolution of her love, given the limited direct contact between them for much of the novel? Elizabeth's feeling for Darcy developed gradually and pass through several stages. At first, she dislikes him because of his insulting remark at the Meryton ball. That dislike grows stronger when Wickham tells his story, which confirms her negative opinion of Darcy. By the time Darcy makes his first proposal, Elizabeth sees him as proud, arrogant, and responsible for both Jane's unhappiness and Wickham's misfortunes. She rejects him with complete confidence, believing her judgment is correct. The turning point comes with Darcy's letter. For the first time, Elizabeth is forced to question her own assumptions. She realizes that she may have judged him unfairly and trusted Wickham too easily. Her dislike does not suddenly become love, but it begins to change his into respect. Jane Austen is careful here. Elizabeth's transformation is not immediate. It starts with self reflection and a growing awareness that she has misunderstood him. Her visit to Pemberley is one of the most important moments in the novel. Before seeing Pemberley, Elizabeth knows Darcy mainly through conversations, rumors, and her own impressions. At Pemberley, she sees evidence of his character. She hears servants speak highly of him, observes how responsibly he manages his estate, and witnesses his kindness toward her aunt and uncle. Most importantly, she meets a version of Darcy who is relaxed, courteous, and considerate. Pemberley allows Elizabeth to see the real man rather than the man she had imagined. In a sense, she falls in love not with his house, but with the character that the house reflects. Some modern readers question whether Elizabeth's love develops too quickly because she and Darcy spend relatively little time together. Yet for Austen's world, the evolution is quite realistic. Their relationship grows through observation, reflection, letters, and social encounters rather than constant conversations. Austen is less interested in physical attraction than in intellectual and moral growth. Elizabeth falls in love when she sees Darcy's true character, and Darcy becomes worthy of her love only after he changes himself. The novel suggests the lasting love is built not simply on romance, but on respect, understanding, and a clearer view of another person's character. Question 4. What attracts Darcy to Elizabeth, and when do we first sense this? Why does it take Elizabeth so long to recognize his regard? How do their attractions to each other differ in nature and development? Darcy is attracted to Elizabeth long before Elizabeth develops any feelings for him. At first, he notices her intelligence, wit, and independence. Unlike many people around him, Elizabeth is not impressed by his wealth or social position. She speaks her mind, challenges him, and refuses to flatter him. This makes her different from the women he is accustomed to meeting. We first sense his growing attraction during Elizabeth's stay at Netherfield while caring for Jane. Darcy begins paying close attention to her conversations, her opinions, and her lively personality. Although he tries to resist these feelings, they continue to grow. Elizabeth, however, is almost completely unaware of Darcy's interest. The main reason is that her prejudice prevents her from seeing the signs. After hearing his insult at the first ball, she places him in the role of the villain and interprets everything he does through that lens. When Wickham confirms her negative opinion, she becomes even more certain that she understands Darcy's character. Because she believes she already knows who he is, she never seriously considers the possibility that he admires her. The nature of their attention is also very different. Darcy's attraction begins with admiration. He is drawn to Elizabeth's mind, confidence, and individuality. His feelings develop even while he still struggles with concerns about social class and family connections. Elizabeth's attraction develops much later and follows a different path. She first learns to respect Darcy, then to admire him, and finally to love him. Her feelings grow as she discovers his integrity, generosity, and willingness to change. This difference is important because it reflects the central themes of the novel. Darcy must overcome his pride before he can be worthy of Elizabeth. Elizabeth must overcome her prejudice before she can see him clearly. By the end of the story, their love rests on mutual understanding rather than first impressions. Austen suggests that the strongest relationships are not built on immediate attraction alone, but on the gradual discovery of another person's true character. Question 5. How does the novel explore women's limited options, economic dependence, and agency in Regency England? Consider characters such as Elizabeth, Charlotte Lucas, and Lydia in your response. One of the most important themes in Pride and Prejudice is the limited choices available to women. In Regency England, many women could not inherit family property, and their financial future often depended on marriage. This is why marriage is discussed so frequently throughout the novel. Austen is not simply writing about romance. She is showing a society in which a woman's security, social position, and future were often tied to whom she married. Elizabeth Bennet represents a woman who wants both love and respect in marriage. Even though her family's future is uncertain, she refuses Mr. Collins because she knows she could never be happy with him. This decision shows her independence and personal agency. Elizabeth is willing to take a risk rather than enter a marriage without affection. Through her, Austen suggests that women should have the right to choose their partners based on more than financial considerations. Charlotte Lucas takes a very different approach. She is older than Elizabeth, has fewer prospects, and understands that opportunities for women are limited. When she accepts Mr. Collins, she is not choosing love, she is choosing stability and security. Austen does not mock Charlotte for this decision. Instead, she presents it as a practical response to the realities of her society. Charlotte's marriage reminds us that not every woman could afford to wait for love. Lydia Bennett provides yet another example. She follows her emotions without thinking about the consequences. Her decision to run away with Wickham almost ruins not only her own future, but also the reputation of her entire family. Through Lydia, Austen shows how vulnerable women could be in a society where reputation mattered so much. A single mistake could have lifelong consequences. By placing Elizabeth, Charlotte, and Lydia side by side, Austen presents three different responses to the same social system. Elizabeth chooses love, Charlotte chooses security, and Lydia chooses excitement. Together, these characters help Austen explore the difficult choices women faced in a world where their opportunities were often limited and their future dependent heavily on marriage. Question 6. What is the role of setting in the novel? How do locations such as Longbourn, Netherfield, Rosings Park, Pemberley, and Meryton reflect or influence characters, class dynamics, and plot developments? In many novels, the setting is simply the background. In Pride and Prejudice, however, the settings help tell the story. The houses, towns, and estates reveal important things about the people who live there. They also reflect differences in wealth, social status, and character. As Elizabeth moves from one place to another, her understanding of people changes, and so do the readers. Longbourn, the Bennet's family's home, represents a comfortable but uncertain middle class life. The Bennets are respectable and own land, but they are not wealthy. Because the estate is entailed to a male heir, the family's future is insecure. Longbourn is also a place of family chaos. Mrs. Bennet's nerves, Lydia's recklessness, and Mr. Bennet's sarcasm all contribute to the lively atmosphere. The problems that begin at Longbourn drive much of the novel's plot. Netherfield represents wealth, opportunity, and social mobility. When Bingley arrives there, he brings new possibilities into the Bennet sisters' lives. Jane's relationship with Bingley develops at Netherfield, while Darcy's attraction to Elizabeth begins to grow. Yet Netherfield also highlights class differences. Bingley's sisters and Darcy often judge people according to social status, creating tensions that influence later events. Rosings Park, the home of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, represents the power and arrogance of the upper classes. Everything about Rosings reflects Lady Catherine's belief in her own importance. During Elizabeth's stay nearby, readers see how strongly social rank influences some people's behavior. It is also at Rosings that Darcy makes his first proposal, one of the most important scenes in the novel. The setting reinforces the issues of class and pride that dominate that moment. Pemberley is perhaps the most important setting in the novel. Before visiting it, Elizabeth knows Darcy mainly through rumors, misunderstandings, and her own prejudices. At Pemberley, she sees evidence of his true character. The estate is impressive, but it is not showy or excessive. It is well managed, beautiful, and harmonious, much like the better qualities of Darcy himself. The servants speak highly of him, and his behavior there is warm and generous. Pemberley becomes a turning point because it allows Elizabeth to see Darcy clearly for the first time. Meryton, the nearby town, represents public opinion, gossip, and first impressions. News spreads quickly there, and people's reputations are often formed through rumors rather than facts. It is in Meryton that Wickham wins everyone's admiration and Darcy earns widespread dislike. The town shows how easily people can be influenced by appearances, one of the novel's central themes. Taken together, these settings do much more than provide scenery. Longbourn shows family life and financial insecurity, Netherfield introduces romance and class tensions. Rosings displays social pride. Pimberley reveals true character. And Meryton reflects the power of gossip and public opinion. Austen uses places almost like additional characters, helping us understand both the people and the society she is describing. Austen largely avoids explicit descriptions of physical passion or intimacy. Is this primarily a reflection of Regency era social conventions, the literary norms of the time, or Austen's deliberate stylistic choice? How does this restraint shape the portrayal of romance and relationships? How does this contrast with Lady Chatterley's Lover, whose summary and analysis I published a few weeks ago? The absence of explicit physical passion in Pride and Prejudice is partly a result of Regency era social conventions and the literary norms of Austen's time, but it is also a deliberate artistic choice. Respectable novels in the early 19th century generally avoided detailed descriptions of sexuality. Open discussions of physical desire would have shocked many readers. However, Austen was not simply following the rules of her age. She was more interested in character, conversation, judgment, and moral growth than in physical attraction. As a result, romance in Pride and Prejudice develops through dialogue, observation, misunderstandings, letters, and acts of character. Darcy falls in love with Elizabeth's intelligence and independence. Elizabeth eventually falls in love with Darcy's integrity and generosity. Austen asks important questions. What kind of person are you when nobody is watching? For her, that question matters more than physical desire. Love grows from admiration, respect, and understanding. This restraint gives the novel a very different feeling from many modern love stories. The emotional tension comes not from physical intimacy, but from psychological and moral conflict. A glance, a conversation, a letter, or a proposal can carry enormous weight because so much remains unspoken. Readers become deeply invested in the characters' inner lives. The romance feels less like a sudden passion and more like a gradual discovery of another person's true character. This creates a fascinating contrast with Lady Chatterley's Lover, whose summary and analysis I uploaded a few weeks ago. If you have already watched the video, you may have noticed that the two novels approach love and relationships from completely different directions. In Lady Chatterley's Lover, physical intimacy is central to the novel's meaning. D.H. Lawrence believed that modern society had separated the mind from the body and damaged human relationships in the process. For him, physical intimacy is not merely about desire. It is a way of reconnecting with life, nature, emotion, and genuine human feelings. That is why the novel contains explicit scenes. They are part of Lawrence's larger argument about what it means to be fully alive. Austen, by contrast, places her emphasis elsewhere. In Pride and Prejudice, the greatest barriers between people are not physical but mental and emotional. Pride prevents Darcy from seeing others clearly. Prejudice prevents Elizabeth from doing the same. The central journey is one of self knowledge. The lovers must change the way they think before they can love each other properly. Seen together, the two novels offer two very different versions of love. Austen suggests that lasting relationships are built on understanding, respect, and good judgment. Lawrence argues that a relationship is incomplete without deep physical and emotional connection. One focuses primarily on character and emotional maturity, the other focuses on the union of mind, body, and emotion. Both are love stories, but they are asking very different questions about what makes a relationship truly meaningful. Question 8. What happens in the novel in terms of external plot events versus internal psychological action and character development? How does the balance between the two contribute to the novel's literary effect? If we look only at the external plot, surprisingly little happens in Pride and Prejudice. There are dances, dinners, visits, conversations, letters, marriage proposals, a trip to Pemberley, Lydia's elopement, and a few marriages. There are no wars, murders, shipwrecks, political revolutions, or dramatic adventures. In fact, a modern reader might be surprised by how ordinary the events seem. Yet, beneath these ordinary events, a great deal is happening psychologically. The real drama of the novel takes place inside the minds of the characters, especially Elizabeth and Darcy. Elizabeth learns that her judgment is not as reliable as she believes. Darcy learns that his pride and sense of social superiority have damaged his relationship. Their most important battles are internal rather than external. Austen is less interested in what happens to people than in how they think, judge, misunderstand, and grow. A good example is Darcy's letter after Elizabeth rejects his first proposal. Externally, very little occurs. A man writes a letter and a woman reads it. Yet, psychologically, it is one of the most important scenes in the novel. Elizabeth begins to question her assumptions, re examine past events, and confront the possibility that she has been wrong. Austen turns an act as simple as reading a letter into a major turning point in the story. This balance between external events and internal development is one reason the novel remains so powerful. The visible events provide structure, but the emotional and intellectual changes give those events meaning. Lydia's elopement matters not only because it creates a family crisis, but also because it reveals Darcy's character. The visit to Pemberley matters not only because Elizabeth travels there, but because her perception of Darcy changes. Again and again, external events become important because of their effect on the characters' minds. This is one of the biggest differences between Pride and Prejudice and many plot driven novels. Austen understands that a person's greatest conflicts often happen within. A mistaken belief, a wounded ego, a false assumption, or a moment of self realization can be as dramatic as any physical event. By focusing on these inner changes, she creates a novel that feels both intimate and psychologically realistic. The result is a story that may appear non eventful on the surface, but is remarkably rich underneath. What readers remember most is not a series of dramatic actions. They remember Elizabeth recognizing her prejudice, Darcy overcoming his pride, and two intelligent people learning to see themselves and each other more clearly. In the end, the novel's greatest action takes place not in drawing rooms or country estates, but in the minds and hearts of its characters. Question 9. How do the comic characters, Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Collins, Lady Catherine, function in the novel? What makes them humorous, and how does the humor serve deeper themes of class, manners, and human folly? One reason Pride and Prejudice remains so enjoyable to read is its humor. Austen fills the novel with comic characters whose words and actions often make us laugh. Yet these characters are much more than sources of entertainment. Through them, Austen exposes the weaknesses, pretensions, and absurdities of the society around her. The humor is not separate from the novel's themes. It is one of the main ways Austen explores them. Mrs. Bennet is funny because she is ruled almost entirely by emotion. She worries constantly, jumps to conclusions, and becomes excited or depressed with remarkable speed. Much of her conversations revolve around marriages, wealthy bachelors, and her daughter's prospects. Readers laugh at her exaggerations and lack of self control. At the same time, Austen reminds us that Mrs. Bennet's fears are rooted in a real problem. Because her daughters cannot inherit the family estate, their futures are uncertain. This makes her both comic and sympathetic. Mr. Collins is perhaps the most ridiculous character in the novel. He is pompous, self important, and completely lacking in self awareness. He constantly praises Lady Catherine, speaks in formal and exaggerated language, and believes himself to be far more impressive than he actually is. His marriage proposal to Elizabeth is one of the funniest scenes in the book because he cannot imagine that she might genuinely refuse him. Through Mr. Collins, Austen mocks people who confuse social position with personal worth and who blindly obey authority without thinking for themselves. Lady Catherine is humorous for a different reason. She is so convinced of her own importance that she believes she has the right to direct the lives of everyone around her. She gives advice whether it is wanted or not, asks intrusive questions, and expects complete agreement with her opinion. Readers laugh because Lady Catherine's confidence is so excessive. Yet Austen is also criticizing a society that gives enormous power and respect to people simply because of their birth and social rank. The humor in these characters serves a deeper purpose. Austen rarely delivers direct lectures about class, manners, or social inequality. Instead, she allows readers to see the absurdity of these things through comic situations and exaggerated personalities. We laugh at Mr. Collins' worship of Lady Catherine, but we also recognize how foolish blind respect for status can be. We laugh at Lady Catherine's arrogance, but we also see the unfair privileges enjoyed by the upper classes. In the end, these comic characters help make Austen's social criticism more effective. Readers enjoy their scenes because they are funny, but beneath the laughter lies a serious observation about human nature. People can be vain, foolish, pretentious, and blind to their own weaknesses. Austen understands this better than most writers. She makes us laugh at her characters, but she also invites us to recognize a little of ourselves in them. Why would you want to read Pride and Prejudice? You might want to read Pride and Prejudice because it proves that a great novel does not need murders, wars, or dramatic adventures to keep you interested. The story is built around ordinary people making ordinary mistakes, yet those mistakes feel surprisingly important. Almost everyone has judged someone too quickly, misunderstood another person's intentions, or allowed pride to get in the way of a relationship. That is why the novel still feels relevant more than 200 years after it was written. You might also read it because Elizabeth Bennet is one of literature's most memorable characters. She is intelligent, independent, funny, and willing to challenge the assumptions of her society. Her journey is not about becoming a different person. It is about learning to see herself and others more clearly. Her growth feels real because it comes from self reflection rather than dramatic events. The novel is also a fascinating window into another world. Through the Bennet family, Austen shows what life was like in Regency England, a society shaped by class, inheritance, reputation, and marriage. You begin to understand why people made the choices they did and how social pressures influenced their lives. At the same time, you realize that human nature has changed far less than fashions, houses, or customs. Most importantly, Pride and Prejudice rewards careful readers. On one level, it is an entertaining love story. On another, it is a study of human behavior. Austen has a remarkable ability to expose vanity, arrogance, foolishness, and self deception with a few lines of dialogue. The more closely you read, the more you notice. If you enjoy books that combine sharp observation, memorable characters, gentle humor, and meaningful personal growth, there is a good chance you will enjoy Pride and Prejudice. It is not simply a story about two people falling in love. It is a story about learning how difficult it can be to see the truth about others and about ourselves. Why you may not want to read Pride and Prejudice? As much as I admire Pride and Prejudice, it is not a book for everyone. If you prefer novels with fast moving plots, constant action, suspense, or high stakes adventure, you may find it slow. Most of the story unfolds through conversations, social visits, letters, dinners, and dances. The major conflicts are emotional and psychological rather than physical. Readers looking for dramatic action may wonder why so much attention is given to who visited whom, who danced with whom, or who said what at a dinner party. You may also struggle with the novel if you have little interest in social customs, manners, and relationships. Austen spends a great deal of time examining how people behave, how they judge one another, and how social expectations influence their choices. For some readers, this is fascinating. For others, it can feel too subtle or uneventful. Another challenge is that the novel belongs to a very different world. Modern readers sometimes become frustrated with the importance placed on marriage, reputation, inheritance, and social rank. Characters often worry about issues that may seem distant from contemporary life. To appreciate the novel fully, you need some patience and a willingness to understand the society Austen is describing rather than judging it by modern standards. Finally, if you are looking for a passionate romance in the modern sense, Pride and Prejudice may not meet your expectations. Austen focuses on conversations, character, and personal growth rather than physical attraction or emotional intensity. The romance is subtle and develops gradually. Readers who enjoy books where relationships are driven by strong physical passion may find Austen's approach restrained. That said, many people who initially think they will dislike Pride and Prejudice end up enjoying it. The plot may appear uneventful, but beneath the surface, Austen is exploring timeless questions about love, judgment, class, family, and human nature. Whether the novel works for you depends largely on what you expect a novel to do. If you want action, it may disappoint. If you enjoy sharp observations about people and relationships, it may surprise you. This brings me to the end of my summary and analysis of Pride and Prejudice. I hope you have found the video informative and useful. If yes, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, or click the bell icon so that you receive a notification when I upload my next video.